The Six Nations Show on OTB Sports Radio.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning!
Updates, analysis and opinion across all OTB channels from start to finish.
Go on, Ireland!
I've never seen a team like Ireland before.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB Sports Radio. The Six Nations Show.
And you're very welcome along to the first Six Nations show of 2020. It's Richie McCormack here with you. I'm not entirely sure how we afforded your man in the Sting, Jonathan Sexton, given the build-up that he's had for this Six Nations, but I'm delighted to say one of his predecessors as Ireland captain is with us in studio to look ahead to the start of the 2022 season. Brian O'Driscoll, it's a pleasure to have you in studio.
Yeah, great to be in here. Yeah, it's we should be in here more.
Yeah, talking about full houses, having you in studio, you know, there's a semblance of normality where this time last year it just seemed like we were talking to Mack Hansen, the Cork footballer, about his brief kind of, I guess, massive 2020 championship in the football, which played out in front of nobody. So we've had these like last couple of years whereby there's been some crowds, there's been small crowds, there's been no crowds, and now we're going to hit in the face with 50,000 people roaring at you.
You wonder, will there be the uptake? I know everyone's has massive appetite to get back to normal, but there's still a lot of nervousness around there. Even some of my friends, there's nervousness around going into public place and that, so there will be a bit of a kind of reintroduction, but there's no doubt we're ready to go and get back to the normality of going to games and having pints and having a laugh and then going out for food or a few jars afterwards or whatnot. But it's weird watching back some of the older games from the last couple of years with nobody in the crowd, and the FX on TV that just is so abnormal and doesn't match what actually is happening in the action. So it's going to be great. And they've talked so much this week, Johnny did, and others talk about how the supporters make games and the atmosphere, and it's true. It's, sport is nothing without people there. So from a player perspective, but also people sitting in half full stadium or 5,000 capacity, where the next person's 6 seats over, shouting, where's the energy from that? So you want it on top of you. You want collective euphoria and disappointment to share the grief of an incident, if that's the case. But it's it's great to feel that we have the capacities for full stadia, whether they fill them or not.
It's just like all of that kind of stuff seems so close, and also like a lifetime ago already. Like we seem to be we've jumped forward 6 steps when we were kind of wondering what the next one was going to be. We now seem to be very much back where we started. And
I know, I was shaking hands today. I was multiple hands, and do you know what, I wasn't reaching for my sanitizer immediately. It's I don't know, it at some point we have to look at trying to return to proper normal, and it feels like now is the time, while still being smart. So it's good that everything feels as though it's opening up again, and that atmospheres can be generated because of numbers allowed through the turnstiles, but also what you can do pre and post game, and just the general hype around. I think there's a much improved enthusiasm in kind of at the core of the whole nation because of where we've come the last couple of weeks. Yeah,
and it's obviously very real now because we've got the team announcements coming thick and fast today. The Ireland one, for those who missed it, the big headline news, of course, is that Mack Hansen is going to be starting on the wing for Ireland, the Australian-born Connacht player winning his first cap. So the team in full, we've got Hugo Keenan at full back, Andrew Conway on one wing, Gary Ringrose is partnered by Bundy Aki in the centre with Hansen on the other wing. The half-backs pretty much as expected with Johnny Sexton alongside Jemison Gibson Park. A front row of Andrew Porter, Ronan Kelleher and Tyg Furlong. They're supported by locks Tyg Byrne and James Ryan, and then that familiar back row we've got to know during the autumn of Caelan Doris, Josh van der Flaer and Jack Conan. Some interesting picks along the bench as well, namely Dan Sheehan is preferred to Rob Herring for a cover at hooker. We've got Joey Carberry who's on the bench ahead of Jack Carty, and James Hume looks set to win a first cap as well. He's been preferred to Robbie Henshaw, who's not included in the matchday 23, but Andy Farrell confirming today that Henshaw had something of an adductor injury going into the week and had missed a couple of sessions, so that kind of makes sense of that. The headline news, as you mentioned though, Mack Hansen, apparently he's been pulling up trees and training and has been impressing everybody.
Doesn't surprise me at all. I haven't heard anything from camp, but that doesn't surprise me. He's been excellent for Connacht when he's played. He looks as though he's going to make something happen every time he gets on the ball. He accelerates aggressively into contact. He's an offloader. He's busy for work. He's not someone that sits on his laurels and waits for the ball to come to him. He gets multiple touches. The game against Munster, Munster game, he must have gotten 5 touches in the first 5 or 6 minutes. So, it's great. A left foot, all important left foot in the back line, for relieving kicks. You see it in Jacob Stockdale, in James Lowe. We saw it in Rob Kearney for more than a decade. Yeah. It's an important aspect to have. That clearance option to get out of your territory. Johnny Sexton one side, and who's going to be on that other side, and Mack Hansen, I'm sure, will step into that position. So it's, I think it's a really clever selection. I know that he is very capable of playing a fullback. I read today in the Irish Times that he plays a bit of 10 as well. So when you're looking at squad players and carrying that additional 10 for Rugby World Cup, is he potentially that guy? Mike Lowry can also do it. So, it doesn't feel like a shock selection because of what form he's shown for Connacht this season. None of the selections seem like a downgrade. Like we had James Lowe in sparkling form, obviously, in November. Injuries has ruled him out, but it doesn't feel like we're losing anything by bringing Mack Hansen in at his expense. No, he's a slightly different player. Obviously, James Lowe is this hugely powerful athlete. Again, gets very busy. Carries the ball off 9 and around the ruck. He, again, very good offloader of the ball. Very rarely dies in possession. So, in some way, there's similarities, but obviously, I don't think Mack quite possesses that same explosive power, but yet he looks as though he packs a punch too. So it doesn't feel like you're losing anything, and that's going to obviously drive major competition when James Lowe watches a guy coming in playing well for his province and doing exactly what he's done ultimately, and made as well. Well, I know it's come through a maternal Castlemartyr down in Cork. Castlemartyr, yeah. So. He's taken his opportunity brilliantly well. Seems very popular, and really good addition to driving those standards in the back three. And when you look at, no one's talking about Jacob Stockdale, who was the future a couple of seasons ago. Jacob Stockdale played in the England game at the end of last Six Nations instead of James Lowe, where James Lowe was gone. He's we're done with him, and then he's come back and developed his game and had a fantastic November, and then all of a sudden he's gone through injury, and now we got this new addition. So it's exciting times. Are you surprised it's happened so quickly for him, or that he settled so quickly, and 2 that he got the call up as quick as he did? Not the call up. I suppose, on the basis of performances, you have to think, well, he deserves to be in the conversation around it. He got the call up, okay. Maybe people felt it might have been a bit before his time, but then subsequently what's happened, he's selected on the back of what's happened in training, where he's stressed defences, where he's impressed the coaches, and they've built their own confidence levels in him and his general game, not just from what they're watching when he's in a Connacht jersey, but when he's doing it in front of them. And as lovers of rugby, we get to judge players on Saturday or Sunday afternoons, but there's so much more to it, and you build a coach's confidence through what you deliver, through picking up the plays very quickly, running the right lines, getting feedback and adjusting what you've done, and then exploiting opportunities at training. And I've used many times the Keith Earls kind of experience of, for years he never quite delivered it at international level, but at training he was ripping us apart. So that's where the confidence is generated, and if you can do it at training, well, there's no doubt that you're going to be able to do it when the adrenaline's coursing through you and you're playing in front of 50,000 people. Yeah. So I'm sure he'll go great. And there's a sense that it's the unknown that Wales are facing, because they've never come across Mack Hansen more or less before, unless they've obviously in an off game in Australia played against them in an international setting. It's definitely something new for them to deal with. Yeah, and difficult for them to properly analyse him. Obviously before you do, when you're analysing the opposition, you'll as personally, you might go through the players that are relevant to you. So from a backline perspective, I would have always obviously gone through every player in the backline. I would have gone through the ball carrying front rowers or back rowers as well, to understand what their favoured moves were and whatnot. But there's not going to be that much footage. Certainly there's none at this level. So they'll have to troll through Connacht games, whether they'll have done the backup of that work. The analysts will be frantically, staying up drinking coffee till the early hours, trying to cut up the movies to show their players over the course of the next couple of days that this is what Mack Hansen likes doing. He's 100% right arm carry, or he favours his left foot step. I don't know if that's the case, but they're going to need to find out and lively to see what he likes doing.
Yeah, and there was an interesting line from Jack Carty last week. He was the first player in front of the press. Now, ironically, he's obviously not in the match day 23, but he was asked about how he has settled into the Ireland setup since his recall, and he was saying that it's actually been pretty seamless, because the way Ireland now go about their rugby is a pretty similar way to how Andy Friend does things at Connacht. And it strikes me that the inclusion of Bundy Aki and Mack Hansen, and even going down to Finlay Bealham on the bench, is no accident. That there seems to be a sense that there's a bit of simpatico between the two styles of play employed by both Connacht and Ireland, that these two lads, and three if you include Bealham, can fit in pretty easily.
Yeah, obviously I think it's hard not to have been impressed with Connacht this season, albeit I know Owen was giving them a hard time last week after their
results.
And there is that, and you don't want to patronise Connacht and say, oh, they're doing great stuff, but yet ultimately have lost 3 of 4 games in the knockout stages. So I'm conscious of not being that, but you can't take the results away from the performances. They've been brilliant and very entertaining and very skillful and very clear of understanding what way they're trying to play the game, the lines of running, pushing passes, even if you don't get the offload, to be there running the support lines, making sure you're in position to to not overload a ruck where it's already won, to then be able to set yourself up for the next phase or the one after that. It's all of that understanding of how a game plan evolves is massively important to how you develop as a player, and then whether you can fit into the next environment. And when the next environment feels the same, it obviously must feel very comfortable to guys that, particularly Jack hasn't been in the environment for a while really, and for him to come back in and go, this doesn't feel overly weird, overly different. Yeah, some different personnel, but much the same sense of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve.
You don't have to go up and down gears essentially, and there isn't a jarring of you're kind of trying to adapt to the different situation.
Well, the best players, I think, are adaptable to whatever circumstance or game plans that a coach puts in front of them. But when your natural game is the one that you're playing for your club, and then it feels, if you feel at ease coming in, it allows you to not use the kind of the mental energy that you might use on trying to fit into a format or a system that feels alien to you. And I get the sense from what Jack was saying, read between the lines, that the previous environment wasn't really his fit. I think
can't be a surprise, really.
Yeah. No, and listen, we've watched Jack Carty over the last couple of years and what type of game he plays. It's heads up. It's play it as you see it, and that is very much the Irish environment now, where before we felt we had to be formulaic, whereas now we've got the athletes and the personnel to be able to make good decisions most of the time, and where they have 2 or 3 different options at the very last second to choose the right one to open up defences. And that's what you need to have, that cutting edge at the very top of the game against the best teams in the world. You need those players that can make the right call at crucial moments, which they've in recent months managed to do, but just have to keep maintaining that now over the course of the Six Nations anyway, and then you take it a step beyond that when you come back with some silverware. Yeah,
I want to get onto the centre partnership in a moment, but you mentioned in terms of trying to continue on that form, the lead into this Six Nations has been really fractured from an Irish point of view, an English point of view, because of the impact that COVID has had. Like we talked about, playing in front of full houses now again, but the amount of games that players have had coming into this Six Nations has been in some cases drastically reduced because of the amount of postponements. Does that impact a player's preparation coming in? I don't know if you've encountered that similar in your day. Or
well, obviously with injury you would, maybe not as a collective, as a group of players, because there's been limitations, number of games. You always have to look at it as a glass half full, where you're fresh and you're hungry and you're raring to go, and rather than feeling as though you're carrying some knocks or bumps and you've got to try and forget them because now you're pulling on your national jersey. So I think you've got to make the most of your circumstance, and that's exactly what they'll have been doing. They'll have been training very hard throughout these, the COVID non-fixtures. A lot of game simulation stuff at training. They would have been put through the rigour. They would have been doing the necessary contact work that they were missing out on in match day environments. So it sometimes too much can be made of that. And it will suit certain personnel and not others. Some guys respond to playing week on week. Other guys like to play every other week. If you're a little bit older, you want to rest up, and you know what it takes for you to get yourself physically and mentally ready.
More in tune, essentially.
You are. Whereas young guys often like playing week on week and just getting into a rhythm and build their confidence up. So it is different depending on what type of player you are. But you're in national camp. You're getting to train with the best players in your country. It's Six Nations. It's full stadia again. It's not difficult to find your best form in that environment. And if you're struggling to, well, maybe the place isn't for you.
Rugby on Off the Ball, of course, is with Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. That centre partnership, as I mentioned, it's Mundiaki in alongside Gary Ringrose. We might have expected Robbie Henshaw to be in the conversation, but injuries obviously had an impact on that, and James Hume was covering on the bench. Is it the centre partnership that you would have gone with?
It's a tough one at the moment. It really is, because of what Bundy and Gary did in the All Black game. It was one of Gary Ringrose's best test appearances. Besides the obvious, big hit on Geordie Barrett that stopped a certain try, he had other great moments, good tackles, good carries, really good decision making. So for me, it's great that he has James Hume now showing great form. For Ulster, I think James might have gotten a capture in the summer, but this is very different than playing against a Japan or a USA. In coming in and your first involvement in a Six Nations game, it's proper Test match rugby, and it's not just the intensity of the game, but it's the excitement of the country around the Six Nations. It's just unique and brilliant. So to have him coming through, Chris Farrell, is kind of the forgotten man in the background now. It feels like Hume has replaced him as one of that four that any two of them could now seamlessly fit in there. And Bundy's the guy in possession. Gary, he might have been Ireland's player of the season last year, but it doesn't matter for anything. If Bundy has another great game and Gary goes well in the partnership with him, very hard not to retain them going forward.
Given the form that everybody's in at the moment, it seems like we're ridiculously well stocked, particularly among the backs.
We are. There is very good form across the board, and we've gotten very excited in the past and not managed to deliver, but the messaging's been really interesting coming out of camp. Is we're just building. We've got way more in us. We can't wait to continue to get better and to strive for closer to perfection. So it's they're very mindful of not thinking that they're chocolate, that they're the finished edition of where they can go, and constantly seem to be reminding themselves as much as they're reminding us as well that they're on this journey. But yet, look across in those starting 7 positions in the back line. Hugo Keenan playing fantastically. Conway has been super solid, exactly what you expect. Mack, the 2 centres, the half-backs have gone well for Leinster. So it does look as though there's guys in lots of form right across the board, to be honest with you. So that's why we are trying to contain our excitement, because what we did see in November was very, very impressive. And I do think that we're one of the couple of favourites, a little bit behind France, to to win the tournament, to win the championship. And that's rightly so on the basis of what we've managed to deliver internationally and provincially over the course of the last 3 or 4 months. But you still have to go and do it.
Yeah. On the Welsh side of things, the talk leading into this game from them has been injuries, and they're down Alan Wynne-Jones, and they're down, they've had so many people withdraw from that squad over the last couple of weeks. And yet still the Rebels named 6 lines in the starting 15. The one big talking point from them, though, is shifting Josh Adams from the wing into the centre. They're trying to essentially repeat the trick that they did with George North. I don't know if this is going to be his first test match playing in the centre. It's a big call for a big game.
Well, he has played a little bit of 13 for Cardiff. I do know that, and I don't know what his wealth of experience at kind of underage or previous club experience at the position is. It's very different, it's the defensive side of things. I think in attack he'll be favourable. He's very good going forward. When you hit him, he needs to he needs to stay hit. His go again is very good. Reasonably good hands from what I've seen, but yet he backs himself massively, a bit like George North as well. But the question marks is, can you manipulate him? Can you get him to bite in defence? Because it's one thing being able to read it from the wing in. You have a bit more time. You have less time at 13 to read, particularly if someone comes charging down either side of either shoulder, and a pass is picked to one or other. Sometimes you don't have that reaction time at 13 to be able to move your body and shift in the way you want to. So I think that will be the huge test, and you'd have to anticipate that Johnny Sexton and the centres will go after him because of his lack of experience. But yet what it does do, it brings Johnny McNichol in here into the wing, who I think is a very, very good player, and I can understand it's a bit of getting your best players on the park, and I'm all for that, to be honest with you.
It seems an effort of fighting fire with fire almost, in that given what the Irish back three can potentially do, and you couple that with the pair of Ringrose and Mackey in the centre, it's almost trying to match that up themselves. And
like if you look at the centre pairings, the back five look pretty evenly matched. You look at Liam Williams, Rhys Hammett. I don't know if anyone would have seen Rhys Hammett's try for Gloucester at the weekend. It looked like a kid playing underage, 3 years above the group he was playing with. It was acceleration and speed, like the international game needs, and that's the big differentiator for him. If he gets the ball in space with time, he will cause damage. So that's Ireland's role at the weekend, is to make sure that when he does get it, he's got a line of 3 defensive players, trying to map him into touch or negate him. And then Williams can create. So there's lots of really talented players in this Welsh outfit. It's never mattered to them in the past about how their provincial setup has gone, how their regions have gone, because they win Grand Slams, they win championships for fun. So we shouldn't have too much sympathy about what their injury woes have been, because you can be sure they'll be very, very competitive still on Saturday.
I'm fairly confident off the back of winning a Six Nations and having a pretty good autumn themselves. I mean, people are kind of forgetting how much form they've been in the last year, pretty much.
They were robbed of a grand, not robbed. France had to grind it and win it, but it should have been a Grand Slam. Many people thought,
but nobody thought that at the start of the Six Nations.
No, they were going to be. Wayne Pivac was in major trouble, wasn't he? He was like lost 6 of 8 or.
This is make or break for him.
And all of a sudden he's winning the championship, and then they've had a reasonable, all things considered, reasonably good November. They obviously lost to South Africa narrowly. They beat Australia narrowly. It wasn't a great performance against Fiji, but they managed to get the job done when they had a man sent off. So, it's Wales. They always manage to deliver when they pull on their national jersey. Very, very proud nation and proud bunch of individuals pulling on their red jersey. So a bit like Argentina, it doesn't matter what the form has shown. They can do something scary if they click, and never feels as though they're that far away from clicking. So You think on paper, looking at the two teams, Ireland at home, they should get it done, but they will, they'll have to earn it, and they'll have to make sure they look after that back row as well. You look at Jenkins and Basham, demons over the ball, Wainwright, moving to 8. I just don't think that they have the punch up in the tight 5 to be able to deal with Ireland's power in that position. So I think that's where we might have the impetus.
I want to talk about the championship a little bit more generally, because obviously we've got the Calcutta Cup match and Eddie Jones is doing Eddie Jones things heading into this game, saying that the Scots are massive favourites. I think red hot favourites is the term he used, given their victory last year at Twickenham, and the fact that Scotland have been a coming force for the last 18 months and are a better side under Gregor Townsend than they have been in previous years. But this looks like it should be a game that's set up for England.
Yeah, I think it's very evenly balanced. You look at the injury concerns and possible lack of leadership from England. You take Courtney Laws out, who's been a mainstay. Obviously, Owen Farrell was their named captain, is going to be gone for the whole Six Nations. No one there to kind of navigate and help Marcus Smith through his first Six Nations. So there's lots of kind of subplots going on. Scotland, albeit they are a coming nation, this is a big tournament for them. They have to deliver now, because there's been a lot more talk. They've had do they have 7 Test Lions during the summer? So the experience has been built from a lot of these players, and now they've got the likes of Cameron Redpath, who only has 1 cap, but yet it was a Calcutta Test match win in Twickenham last year. So guys like him coming back into the fold, Finn Russell playing brilliant stuff for Racing. So there's so much going on for them as well, but it's no more talking time. It's no more occasional victories here or there. They've got to run kind of 3 or 4 victories together and start being championship contenders for them to properly build the credibility that perhaps they feel they deserve.
Are they capable of it? I
think they are capable. I think they are. I think they'll be very, very difficult in Murrayfield in particular. I think in Ireland, I suppose it all depends on the personnel too, on when they come to Ireland. We're in
we go over there.
We're over there. Yeah, it'll be a bloody hard place to go and play and try and win a championship. Depends on what their injury list looks like. I think one thing that we have over them is a strength and depth that they quite don't have. It feels like us a few years ago, where a very good 25 or 30, but if you start picking up 5, 6, 7 injuries, you delve into second, third choices in certain positions. I think that's where they have the potential to struggle a little bit. And their first 15 in particular looks very strong, decent bench, but thereafter you wouldn't be afraid of some of the personnel that are coming in.
How far ahead of everybody else are France?
Not a million miles ahead of us, I would say.
Okay,
but they're ahead of us. They're for me, with France, it's the fact that they haven't got the baggage of previous French teams. These are young players. They've culled everyone a couple of years ago over 30. Yeah. Right, you're not going to be part of the World Cup in a couple of years' time, so you're gone, irrespective of what form you're showing. Bit harsh if you've just hit your 30th birthday. But anyway, you've got these young guys that have won the Under-20 World Championship. They're winning boucliers with Toulouse and European Champions Cups. These guys are fearless. They really are fearless, and they're playing with the freedom of French teams of old, and then they've got the coaching of Fabien Galtier as well, who's bringing back that flair aspect that we associated with the early noughties teams and the French teams in the 90s and 80s, which we know and love, and where they're at their best, and they're unplayable when they get into their groove that way. So the fact that we have them in round 2, we don't have to go to Edinburgh.
It's Edinburgh, you're right.
Yeah. No, we have them home. We have to go to Paris, and so you go. If you win against Wales, you go to Paris and you scrape a victory of some sort. You are in such great shape. But you lose one of the first 2, you're scrambling immediately. You need to get victories. You might be able to change the same personnel, so it just changes the course of what you might try out in the Six Nations. So It's it's a good French team though, with lots of power up front. They look fit too. They look strong. Paul Willemsen in the second row looked big and overweight and heavy in Montpellier 18 months ago, a year ago. I think the player he's turned into, and he's now a 70-minute guy and being able to bring on fresh legs. Their back row, you could pick one of 3 of 6, 3 of 7 easily. So Cyril Bay, one of the informed loose heads in the world that doesn't really get the recognition that he deserves. Marchand, another beast for Toulouse at hooker. Like, you've got really world-class players playing very, very well. So again, their strength and depth looks very, very impressive. The quality of young guys coming through now matching with the experience of some of those guys in their late 20s just looks like a really nice balance.
Is their baggage the fact that they haven't actually won the thing in 12 years?
Yeah, it is. But like I said, I don't know if these players feel that baggage. There's very few leftover players from that era. Is there anyone? Was even Gail Ficou playing back then 11 years ago? I wouldn't think so. I think he's only in his late 20s. So I think it's not like there's guys that are in the environment going, I haven't won a championship in my time. I think that they've cut all those loose, and they like lots of French teams, they're confidence teams, and their confidence must be sky high at the moment, because a lot of their teams are going very well in Europe. They've just beaten the All Blacks for the first time in Paris in 40 odd years or something, and they did it playing their way, which
scary
is scary. And but they're putting pressure on themselves too, because they've got to win a championship before they host the World Cup in 18 months' time, and that brings a scrutiny from the public and from the media, where it'll be very hard for them to maybe go and win a World Cup if they don't have a Six Nations in the bag in the 2 seasons preceding it.
How do you go about killing that confidence within the 80 minutes?
Early, start early, particularly when when you're going to Stade de France. That was the job always early on, was try and silence the crowd in the first 10 or 15 minutes. That you let them go and you let them get on top of you and play with that freedom. You just have to get in their faces, make a nuisance of yourself, hold on to the ball and not give them possession, and just make sure that you're not a couple of scores behind after the 20-minute mark. So the thing is, it's changed a lot. I talk about when I was there 20 years ago, like the mentality of this group of professional players, not just Irish players. They go in and they don't really worry themselves if they do go a couple of scores behind, because I think teams that are going well, and including this Irish team, they'll feel as though they have 2 quick scores in them themselves. A bit like New Zealand, where there's never any panic buttons pressed. It's like, oh no, we got players that can score individual tries. We got a great team ethos that we can score a team try, and it only takes 3 minutes to score 2 tries, so there's no panic. And when you have that mentality that you have the ability to score from wherever, well, there's a comfort that comes with that. So I think you got to be in the game against France, with 10 to go, because then they do play on or start listening to a silent crowd, or them getting on their backs, or it's just not going your way. That is still a thing. That'll be a thing in 30 years' time as well, because it's the French way, that they love their heroes, but they
want them to deliver as well.
Yeah, they do want them to deliver, and now that they've put themselves in a position where the expectation is to deliver well, there's nowhere else to go. Yeah,
we're all set up for what will be. We don't want to say a Grand Slam decider. Do you see someone win a Grand Slam out of this?
No. I think Scotland and Wales, everyone will take a scalp of some sort from one another. I think Italy will undoubtedly be beaten by every team. We used to go to England, to Twickenham's. It's, in more recent times, we obviously won in 2018, but it's a difficult place to go and play against any English team. And depending on what results they have prior to that, we don't play them till the 4th game. So, they might be licking their wounds, or they might be building for something great for in Paris the following week. So that's the great thing about this competition. We are trying to sit and predict what's going to happen, but the outlook will look vastly different after 1 week, because some teams will be thriving and excited, and others will be nervous and tight, and might revert to type a little bit, because the prospect of losing 2 games on the bounce is unthinkable. And where do you go? Where does your season go from there? So it changes with 180 minutes, and that is the brilliance of this. So start well, and the world's your oyster. Start badly, and don't compound a loss with a second loss.
Keep your head down and get the next game out of it. But I definitely get the feeling that you fancy Ireland to actually take a championship out of this. So there is the capability of the Irish squad.
Capability. I think fancying it. I think what Ireland need to do is they need to put themselves in a position to go and win the championship in against Scotland. Yeah. And I think they can absolutely do that, because you do feel as though Ireland at home are very, very good. And particularly what we saw in the Aviva during November, it's hard not to feel very positive about that. The fact that we have to go to Paris and London is difficult. To win both games, they did it in 2018 and won the hard Grand Slam. So why couldn't they do it again? I think you look at the strength and depth. Our real point of difference for me now is our front row, where before we were always looking at trying to get parity or just manage opposition front rows. I think now we are the envy of lots of countries with our starting front row, but also
the people you have to come off the bench,
particularly Dan Sheehan coming off, Cian Healy, wealth of experience. Even I don't know a lot about Finlay Bealham, but talking to Ben Kaiser, he was talking about exceptionally good technique for a very small prop, at international level. So all of these aspects make you feel as though if we can have a really great front row, we know we always have good back rowers, and we know we've got controlling half backs, and we've got some good firepower, and we've got control of 15. It's like there's lots of good components to our team now, so why wouldn't we be in the mix come the final weekend of the Six Nations?
You've got me buzzed, Brian.
No, I'm always so careful, because you're easily chopped at the knees.
Enthusiasm is okay though.
I know it is, but you are trying to keep tabs on the excitement. But the fact that we've been here before, I won't go saying that none of the Welsh team will get in the Irish team. I won't go so far as that. I'm sure there's a
peacekeeping mission underway from here. Yeah.
I won't fall into that trap again. But it does feel as though we have a very, very strong team at the moment, based on our previous performances, and they have to add to that. What was great was the New Zealand performance was excellent after the Japan performance, but so was much of the Argentina game,
with a change
where you could have with change 15, where you could have just almost had a mental exhaustion on the back of a big victory against the best team in the world, and they didn't, and they fell behind a score, and then they scored 50.
Yeah.
So it's just hard not to get a little bit giddy and excited about the prospect of what this team can do if they continue to deliver, continue to evolve, continue to put themselves in a position where they can have multiple shot selections and then pull the trigger on the right one.
Yeah.
Because all you can do against defences is make them uncomfortable, and that's what they're doing at the moment with their lines of running, with their animation, with their deception, with everyone being a viable option. You're going to have defences biting in, and that's where you'll create space out wide, and if they stay wide, then you go through the middle, like Tadhg Furlong did against Scotland, like he did against England a couple of times. So it's we've got a very skillful team at the moment, and it does feel as though we're going in the right direction, but we've got to continue to prove that.
Yeah, things on Saturday obviously will be prefaced by memorials for Tom Kiernan, who sadly passed away today. An incredible career, one of your predecessors, both as Ireland captain and as Lions captain. I'm sure you would have crossed paths with him even briefly down through the years, but an incredible legacy he leaves behind.
Fantastic legacy. I guess his playing days were before my time, but and even from a coaching perspective, it was kind of 70s and 80s, wasn't it? But he was president of the IRFU in the early 2000s when I was involved with the team. So we would have crossed paths at many's a dinner in the Berkeley court. And I guess when you haven't experienced someone else's career, you have to feed off what way other people speak to him and talk about him. And I think that spoke volumes for anyone of slightly older generation than me or his generation. They, he was thought so highly of. And obviously then for the Lions in 2017, when the first time they brought all the existing Lions captains together for the announcement of Sam Warburton, he was one of those captains. So to get to share a dinner, it's a pretty exclusive club to be part of. So it's kind of cool to regale old stories and hear of how the game has evolved and changed over multiple decades. So a big loss to Irish rugby, and thoughts to with his family. Yeah,
one of those names that will continue to echo down through the years for sure. Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend the first Six Nations show in your company. Cheers, in the studio, Richie. In this brand new normal that we have here, which seems to be pretty normal as well. More from us after these.
The Six Nations Show on OTB Sports Radio.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning!
Updates, analysis and opinion across all OTB channels from start to finish.
Gone on it!
I've never seen a team like Ireland before.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB Sports Radio. The Six Nations Show